This week on the Woven Energy podcast.
All shamans, all real shamans, understand these changes. Not understanding is a much better starting point than misunderstanding when you come to this kind of stuff. And one of the problems with this stuff, when it's written down or even talked about on a podcast, is that people quickly try to categorize it in terms of their everyday mundane experience. And so this is why we see spirals all over. Well, this is a result of the fact that we see spirals everywhere in nature. We see water going down a plug hole. We see mollusk shells that spiral around. Although the Mongols themselves wouldn't talk in terms of the 8 trigrams. In terms of the verbs for the changes that they would use in describing their spirit dance, you can actually quite easily, it's not difficult. It's not like I'm any kind of genius having come up with this. This is very, very easy and straightforward. Probably not going to have any time to do anything more than just this, is just to briefly talk through those 8 changes in terms of energy. If you find yourself doing that when we're discussing the 8 trigrams, I know all about this because it's just ... then, you might be right, but I bet you're not.
Welcome to the Woven Energy podcast on real practical shamanism with me, Joseph Sikora, and Damon Smith, where we try to paint an intricate and detailed picture of shamanism from the ground up. And this week we are starting the process of stage 3 of learning shamanism. Now, that means we need to add another layer and go deeper to lay the foundation so stage 3 becomes possible and you don't get caught up in the pitfalls. So we're going to start with this episode, the process of tackling the trigrams from the I-ching. Now, as we've discussed copious amounts of times in previous episodes, nature, the world, we exist in a continuous cycle of change or changing energies. This is understood experientially in shamanism and shamanic technique. Now, I remember we mentioned in a previous episode somewhere that the Chinese took this complete understanding of the changes to a whole new level and essentially documented these changes down in the form of the I-ching, the 8 trigrams and the 64 hexagrams. They took what was intuitive from shamanic practice and understanding and did a whole heap of baseline analysis, ran with it until we have the enormous body of work we now know of. It is, however, quite important to tackle this from the reference point of experience because, as was inevitable with things that are esoteric in nature and not particularly spelt out for us, there is a whole heap of misinformation, misunderstanding and reductionism which has taken place over the years with religious and cultural interference and various commentaries. So, taking this wonderful, real and extremely practical body of work and reducing it down to fortune telling and yarrow stalk flipping, which is not helpful and is not what it's really about. So the reason we want to tackle the I-ching, and I think we might spread this out and mix in a different episode here and there. Keep this as a general theme in the background because it is heavy and it is baseline heavy. By that I mean we're analysing and thinking about this stuff rather than experience and doing. But yeah, the reason we want to talk about this is because it forms the foundation of shamanic technique and becomes important to a degree, as far as I understand it. Damon might correct me, to stage 3 of learning shamanism. So we've covered stage 1 and 2 in quite a bit of depth now, and I guess as they might say in Hollywood, shit's about to get real. So yeah, it's going to be the start of a big topic because we want to cover it in the amount of depth and realism we have become known for. So today we are going to start at the very beginning and try and lay down the foundation and the way we want to approach this. So Damon, why should we be interested in the I-ching and how does it relate to shamanism or someone's journey into shamanism?
We've drawn a distinction in a lot of the podcasts that we've done between shamanism on the one hand and esotericism on the other hand. Shamanism, as we know, has 3 realms or breaks, changes down into 3 different aspects, and we've referred to these by various different words. But typically, a shaman, a real shaman in a hunter-gatherer society, would have been understanding these things as part of his growth as a shaman, as part of his understanding as a shaman. He wouldn't have thought of them as three lines in a trigram, for instance. That it wouldn't have occurred to a lot of shamans to think about it in that way, because the Chinese later, when we stopped being hunter-gatherer societies, we talked about the difference between Nuwa and Fuxi in Chinese mythology. Nuwa being the shamanistic aspect, and Fuxi being the civilized aspect. The analysis of the three realms in terms of yin and yang, which is effectively what the trigrams are about, that analysis is definitely part of esotericism and would have very little to do with, proper, real hunter-gatherer shamanism, except that understanding is fully part of the shamanistic experience of shamans in hunter-gatherer societies. But perhaps the way they come to that understanding is somewhat different in a true shamanistic environment than the way that we come to it through things like the trigrams in a esoteric environment. But the fundamental understanding, when I say understanding, you know what I mean by now, understanding on the baseline, midline, top line, all acting together as one, not just on the baseline. That understanding is arrived at through slightly different mechanisms. And the 8 trigrams as a mechanism for understanding the changes in the universe, the energy changes in the universe, are very much in the camp of esotericism, but obviously have an intimate relationship to the camp of shamanism.
Okay, so the trigrams are like a language we can use to, sort of like write it down, I guess, write down the baseline, the midline, and the top line. And so what these episodes are about is trying to read that language.
Yeah, I would just put the word merely on the front of that. That's quite a good explanation. So you can think the 8 trigrams are merely a language that we can use to write down changes, if you like. If you think of the universe as having had a beginning, we talked about the shamanistic the shamanistic intuition that the universe seeks closure. The universe has a beginning, and the universe seeks closure. Are 2 long-standing intuitions in shamanistic traditions. That at that beginning, the universe started to change. The universe is effectively created of energy, whatever. We've gone into quite a lot of detail in terms of what we mean by energy. And, energy is this catch-all in English. There are lots of words in the languages of shamanistic peoples that would sure highlight different aspects of that. But if you want to think,
I think we're going to that in episode 16 if anyone's interested.
Yeah. So, but in general, if we stick with the English word energy, we can think of the universe as having an initiation, a beginning, a singularity, if you want to think of it in scientific terms, and then from that point forwards, the universe created the space that we live in. It created the things that we're made of, but it could create them in terms of continual change. Nothing is ever static, and this is one of the first things that we possibly should caution Westerners against. Westerners tend to think of things in terms of things. We've said many times we put things in little boxes. We've also said that sometimes people say that that's partly to do with the influence that Plato had on us. The key point is that the 8 trigrams are not things. They are changes. That is something changing. And if you want to understand shamanism, you have to get away from this idea of things. Something being unchanging and permanent, even in shamanism, even in the Book of Changes, we would call that persist. And even persist, something being unchanging, it's changing in that it's persisting. So we have to, yes. So persist is considered a change in the Book of Changes, yeah. So what I'm saying is you have to get away from this idea that things are ever static. In the shamanistic worldview, nothing is ever static. The universe is one ongoing process of change. What is it that's changing? Energy, in the broader sense. How is it changing? Myriad different ways, almost infinite different ways it's changing. Can we identify commonalities within those changes Yes, we can. Historically, the Chinese have identified 8 commonly occurring patterns within those energy changes. And these are the things that the 8 trigrams symbolize. These are recurring patterns that come up again and again and again in nature, recurring patterns of energy change. And so you can think of each of the 8 trigrams, each individual trigram, as being one of these commonly recurring energy changes that occur in the natural world.
Right. Can we quickly address, before we carry on and dive deep into them, can we quickly address, I have a feeling, I could be wrong, I have a feeling that people have a preconceived idea of the I-ching, and that's fortune telling and flipping yarrow stalks, as I mentioned in the introduction. Can we briefly address that? Because it's not entirely untrue, is it? It's
well,
as far as shamanic technique goes, it's just been misunderstood and
that's quite an advanced question. An explanation of where that came from is yarrow stalk flipping. Where that stuff came from is probably a better thing to delve into after we've covered the trigrams than before. The people who we've said, we have sort of covered it in one of the previous podcasts, I don't know which one, but we said that shamans when we started living in civilized societies, which had much more hierarchical structures and somebody was in charge than the hunter-gatherer societies that shamanism originally developed in, shamans' roles changed, they mutated in those societies, and they had to, quote-unquote, earn a living. And one of the ways in which they earned a living was this kind of fortune-telling. We talked about the Omyosha, who were the divinators to the imperial family in pre-modern Japan, in pre-samurai Japan, in pre-feudal Japan. Those guys did exactly that kind of thing. They did yarrow stalk flipping. We talked about the dragon bones in China, where people would put drill a hole in a piece of animal bone and put a hot implement in, and they would interpret the cracks. All of those things are effectively changes, and flipping yarrow stalks could be the same thing. They're external changes that you can use to generate some spontaneous change from which intuition can be derived. So you can see where that kind of thing comes from. But if the key part in any one of those exercises, it doesn't matter whether it's yarrow stalks or it's dragon bones or what it is. The key part is, the primary part of that is the shamanistic technique. Yeah. What is used as a slight impetus to create some change to that technique, much better coming from nature, much better coming from a tree. Remember, we talked in the Amsker exercises, we talked about putting your fingers on the branch of a tree and allowing the movement of the branch in the air to control your breathing. That's a way better source than flipping yarrow stalks. But if you imagine you're in the imperial palace in Japan, or one of these great palaces in China with one of these early rulers, there may not be a tree to hand, and yarrow stalks are a lot easier to carry around. Yeah. So, but I think we could delve, again, it's a miasma episode. It's not a shamanism episode, but we could delve into that. Where did all this fortune telling stuff come from? But the key point with that stuff is, it's the shamanistic technique that is important. That's what determines whether it's shamanism or not. If you just flip a few yarrow stalks, that doesn't make you any kind of a shaman, And if you think it's just like dice, the Western concept of dice, and you see what comes up and then you look it up in the book, then you're really very, very, very far off the mark. That's probably the best way to put it.
I guess my point was, sorry, carry on.
No, that was all I was going to say, mate.
Okay, well, I guess my point was to try and emphasize that there's no belief needed for this stuff, especially the route we're going down. There's no belief needed. It's
absolutely not. Absolutely not.
I remember, that'll become very clear soon, I hope, anyway, when we dive deep into them. But I do remember when you first started teaching this stuff to me and our guys, you made sure that every time that you went into one of the trigrams, we experienced it physically as well. Do you remember that? Do you remember we did like a physical exercise for each of the trigrams so we could actually internalize it?
I still do that stuff. I still do that stuff, Joe. Just we're far away from each other these days. But with the people that I help down here, For those that aren't aware, Joe and I live very many hundreds of miles away from each other. I still do that. And understanding things in a physical sense, it's one way you can understand things. We talked about the baseline bias in an early episode. It doesn't matter whether you understand things in a spiritual sense or in a physical sense. The sense we tend to want to stay away from is the sense that that the 8 trigrams tend to push people down, which is the baseline, because, we've said we're all good at that, but we're a bit obsessed with it. And if you remember, we talked through the great painting Travelers Among Mountains and Streams by Fan Quan. That's the whole thing with the baseline bias is very, very it's very, very non-shamanism. It's very, very civilization in its nature. And you can see that shamanism doesn't have to deal with civilization, at least it didn't in its original form. Esotericism does indeed have to deal with civilization. It has to embed itself in a fairly safe and persistent way within civilization. So you can see why the 8 trigrams, in a formal sense, are needed within esotericism, and they're not needed within shamanism.
Was the 8 trigrams and the I-ching and that body of work driven underground? Because it's very well known now, isn't it? Out of pretty much all of the esoteric.
Well, do you remember what we said about
know.
hiding things in plain sight? And this is pretty much what it's all about. It's about hiding things in plain sight. It was known, but although it was known, that doesn't mean that it was understood. Yeah. So there are lots of, take a parallel. The I-ching is one of the oldest books in the world. And as we've said before, it's got huge amounts of Confucian commentary in it, which exotericizes it to a great extent. And when people start understanding the I-ching, they start reading commentaries that explain it to them. And those commentaries tend to be written by Confucianists who have a certain exoteric agenda. We said that Confucianism is all about how to create a harmonious society using harmonious social structures. Well, those social structures themselves are the foundation of exotericism. That's what exotericism is there for, is to maintain those social structures. So although the original meaning of the I-ching is very shamanistic and predated all of that stuff, in terms of when we became esoteric, the book was of equal use to exotericists in the form of its Confucian understanding. How should we construct society in order that everybody lives harmoniously? Compared to its esoteric understanding, which is, hey, let's ignore all the commentary and just look at the changes and understand them in a physical and spiritual way. Those two things, it's the same book, right? It's physically the same book. But the two groups of people approaching that book have very, very different attitudes to it. One group think the commentary, almost to the point that the commentary is more important than the changes. Yeah. The other group are only interested in the changes. Yeah. So that's it. But again, we could have multiple miasma episodes on these subjects. The key point is that I find the trigrams useful only for one thing, which is when you're trying to understand shamanism, and you're from a civilized, settled society, you will inevitably try to do baseline stuff. And in a way, if you ignore the commentary, the 8 changes and the 64 changes, so you can think of the 8 changes as just being energy changes, and the 64 are just an expansion of that. Because whenever you have a change occurring within the microcosm, you have a change recurring within the thing of focus or the thing of interest, but you also have a context to that. You have an environment or context in which that change is happening, and that environment is also changing. That context is also changing. So we stack the trigrams, the one on the base, the lower trigram, being the thing of focus, the microcosm, and the upper trigram referring to the change that's happening within the context. So, and that's how we end up with 64 hexagrams. But my point is that all of those changes, they are of nature, they're to do with nature. And the 64 hexagrams and the 8 trigrams, to me, they're not a religion. You don't believe in them or anything like that. They can be useful in helping you understand the things that are happening when you start to learn spirit dance and indeed some other shamanistic techniques as well. They can help you understand those changes. Unfortunately, they help you understand on the baseline, but in a way, it's quite, as long as you ignore the commentary, the I-ching is quite cleverly constructed in that it's a categorization system, which is what all of us, Confucians and Westerners, are all looking for. We like to categorize things and put them in little boxes. It's a categorization system that, in a way, forces you to uncategorize, because nothing is ever static in there. It's always changing. And so the expansion of the 8 trigrams and 64 hexagrams becomes, it borders on infinity. And so our mind gets, as esotericists, our mind gets this exoteric hit. Ooh, nice. That's a classification system. Think of the 8 trigrams. Ooh, 8 categories. I understand this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. That means this means that. Yeah.
But then when we start looking into it, we find out that we got 2 choices. We can either experience it in a shamanistic way and come to an understanding that way, or we can start believing things about it, and then we can take it down the exoteric route. So in introducing the 8 trigrams, obviously, we would like to send people down the shamanistic route, and not the exoteric route. But what I was going to say is the key point with the physical demonstrations that Joe is referring to is physical demonstrations are quite good for this stuff. And this is part of what spirit dance is all about, because there's no theory involved. Physical demonstrations, you can see and feel and hear and sense what's actually happening.
Experience them.
You get the flavor of it. Whereas when you talk about it, like on a podcast or in a book or in a commentary, then you don't get that same kind of experience. And instead, your brain starts to categorize and drop things into categories. Oh, I understand that. It's like that. And every time your brain does that, in shamanism, 99 times out of 100, you're wrong. That's
I think this is a really good point to mention that you do have a book out on this, and in the beginning of that book, we'll talk about that book in a second. But at the beginning of the book, it says, basically, it says you won't understand. I'm paraphrasing, Damon, but it basically says you won't understand this book unless you know one of us, and it's gone over with you.
Let's be careful about that. You won't understand this. I didn't say that in the introduction to the book. I can't remember the exact wording, but it's not the sort of thing I would have said. It's not like, when it depends who you mean by us. Yeah. You need experiential understanding. And ideally we talked about guides, shamanistic guides. You need somebody who's been through the process. So when you say us, we need to be very, very clear. We're not talking about the Woven Energy Club here. We're talking about, you want to say us in terms of those people in the world who there are still thousands and thousands of, and it doesn't have, some of those people are not members of the Woven Energy Club, because first of all, Woven Energy isn't a club, so they couldn't join. But when you say us, you need to be careful what you mean by that. Somebody who understands this, all real shamans understand these changes. Yeah. But one of the things that one of my teachers did say, which is perhaps what you're referring to, is that he said that not understanding is a much better starting point than misunderstanding when you come to this kind of stuff. And one of the problems with this stuff, when it's written down or even talked about on a podcast, is that people quickly try to categorize it in terms of their everyday mundane experience. They try to categorize it in terms of what they already know. And that's exactly what you want to avoid doing if you ever want to be a shaman, because we said shamanism is partly about getting rid of your characterizations, getting rid of your judgments. Another way that another of my teachers put it is, and this is quite a famous saying in the Far East, you can't put tea in a full cup. And this is one of the things I think we talked about Qigong one time. People come with understanding of Qigong or some knowledge of what they think is Qigong, and they see that it has, because it's about energy work, they see that it has some kind of relationship to shamanism, and then they see Qigong wherever they look in shamanism. Yeah. And so that's what I mean by you can't put tea in a full cup. That cup is full of Qigong tea, and that's exactly the wrong starting point. So, and my cup's full of all sorts of things. I've studied all kinds of interesting, weird, and wonderful subjects. I guess when I first came to this stuff, my cup was full of martial arts. I'd been doing martial arts for many years. When I first encountered shamanistic ideas, this would be in the mid 1980s. And for many years, I understood shamanism in terms of martial arts, which is exactly the wrong way around. You know, this day and age, I sort of understand martial arts in terms of shamanism, which is the right way around, because to me, shamanism exists at a much more fundamental of existence than martial arts does. Martial arts is like an example of how you could apply shamanistic technique for a useful ends. One of many, 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 verging on infinite examples of how you could do that. So all of us, this is what Chalicity is about. Chalicity is about us emptying our cups. So if you find yourself doing that when we're discussing the trigrams, I know all about this because it's just ... then, you know, you might be right, but I bet you're not.
Okay, well, my point was that you do have a book on this, and I think now that we're diving into this subject, it would be a good companion to these episodes. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
I think that, I mean, obviously we're not going to get through this in one episode, Joe. I mean, we both know that. We both know that. So I don't think it'll be a good companion to the first couple of these episodes. Maybe, so I guess for the first few episodes, we're dealing with the 8 trigrams, not the 64 hexagrams. It will be a useful companion to the 64 hexagram episodes. It would be a useful companion for that. Yeah.
Well, we'll mention it a few times, but just mention what it is and where people could get hold of it, and then we can dive into.
Okay,
perhaps.
So it's a book called The Western White Tiger I-ching, and you can get it on Amazon. I'll just get a web browser up and make sure that it's still up there, because it's quite a fringy book. So let's have a look. Amazon.co.uk.
There's actually 2 versions up on Amazon as well.
Yeah, so the more recent version is called The Western White Tiger I-ching, and it's up on Amazon. They're not currently stocking it, but there are some people selling it new, and there's also some new stuff on there. That's on Amazon.co.uk because we're in the UK, so it is up there. And it's not very expensive, so. And
it's basically it's the 64 hexagrams without the commentary, isn't it? It's
yeah. I mean, it's clearly not a very popular book, or Amazon would be stocking it. I think, you know, when people want a book of about the I-ching, they tend to want to go for the thickest one they can find. You know. And I guess if you're a Confucianist and you're interested in Confucianism or even religious Taoism, then I'd recommend you go down that route, you know. If you're interested in shamanism, then this Western White Tiger I-ching, it was done from a shamanistic esoteric point of view. It's just chopping out lots of stuff that is of no interest to anybody in our very, very small field. So that's where it is. But it says, let's see, I'll see what the new copy is. 1367. Oh no, there's a new one for £10.88, sold by Books Etc. as a seller on Amazon, and there's a used copy it's actually more expensive than that, so I would go with it. So they are £10.88.
I think someone bought it, Damon, and then realised there was nothing in it, and then sent it back. Anyway, we'll put a link. We'll put a link up in the episode.
Yeah.
So if we're going to start at the beginning, then how we read these. I mean, I don't know where you want to start, Damon. You're the expert here, but my idea would be let's just quickly recap on how to actually read the 3 lines, because as we know, a trigram has a baseline, a midline, and a top line.
Yeah. So you know, the baseline is the underworld, the midline is the middle realm, or the manifest realm, as we called it, and the top line is the creative realm. So, you know, in Mongol, we've called the top realm, we've referred to it as Tengar. Or the spirit of the top line realm, we've referred to as Tengar. The midline is referred to with a wide range of different words, but it's just the manifest realm, but it's also nature in a sense. So we've said Atandechil is one of the words we could use there, which means it almost means like Mother Nature. And then the underworld, the Tam, the spirit of the underworld, the Tam. And then we said with, you know, the tree, the world tree, the branches and leaves, they would be the upper realm. The trunk of the tree, that with the world in between, that would be the middle realm. And the roots of the tree, that would be the lower realm. And we these are just the lines we're talking about. There's no difference. You draw them as a trunk of a tree, the branches and leaves of a tree, and the roots of a tree. That's no different from the roots of the tree is the bottom line, the trunk of the tree is the middle line, and the branches and leaves is the top line. There is no difference. They're just different ways of writing down the same thing, or drawing the same thing, or symbolizing the same thing. There's no difference whatsoever. So the world tree, and it might be controversial opinion, I don't know, certainly in the world of Confucianism, but the world tree and a trigram, the same thing. There is no difference. Yeah. Identical. Yeah. Identical. Yeah. So how do we want to break them down? Well, let's talk about what those worlds are. There are many, one of the issues with this stuff, there are many different ways we can explain this. Yeah. I think we explain this in terms of interpersonal interactions. The baseline, the underworld, is like the results. It's like it's in terms of people meeting each other for the first time. It's like the strategy that they employ in terms of dealing with other people. We said some people can be very friendly, some people can be very sort of standoffish and unfriendly. Those would be the strategic or the strategies that they would be undertaking, that person, in dealing with somebody that they'd met for the first time. That standoffishness, so that would be the baseline. That standoffishness or that friendliness is often achieved through body language, through physical actions. You know, if they're very, very friendly, they might immediately give you a hug. Yeah. Those physical actions, the physicality, and the things that give impetus to the physicality. Think of the central nervous system and the physicality. That's the middle line. That's the manifest realm. That's what's manifesting that strategy. And then there's the things that give rise to that strategy. That would be the top line, the impetus. So in all of these things, you have in any change, you have what gives rise to the change, which is previous changes or things that have gone before, the change itself as it's happening, and then you have the results of the change, which become the raw material from which the upper realm, so the baseline of the results of the change, that becomes the raw material from which the upper realm then continually generates further change. So you've got to think of these trigrams as freeze frames, that they're static positions that never occur in real life because these changes are continual and fluid, and that's why we call it woven energy. The energy is in a continual weave. So in terms of the changes themselves, what's happening there, we have the thing that gives the impetus to the change itself, and the thing that arises from the change or the situation or the results of the change. Those are the top line, the midline, and the baseline. When we encounter somebody for the first time, we encounter their strategy first. Once we get to know them a bit, then we come to understand their midline. And once we know them for a long time, we may get some sense of what's giving rise to all of that, their spirituality, their inner self. That would be the top line. So this is very often, and when we're dealing with these things physically in the martial arts, it's the same thing. The first thing we encounter may be their strategy, their guard, or their position, or their strategy in terms of how they're fighting. Then we encounter their physicality, and how that's been implemented, and what gives and then finally what gives impetus to that. It's the same thing in the martial arts. So we tend to, because a lot of the practical applications of these things, and indeed in dance, you know, when people start to learn dance movements, they see the result. They often understand dance in terms of these sort of freeze frame positions through which the dancer moves. And when they're learning the dance steps, they focus on those freeze frame positions, not just in spirit dances. You could do something like salsa, you know. They're these sort of freeze frame positions through which the dancer goes. That's all the baseline stuff, but that's not the important stuff. That's just the end result of the fact that their physicality is creating that. The physicality is causing the changes that are giving rise to those seemingly freeze frame positions, and then what's ultimately given rise to those physical changes that drive in the central nervous system to drive the muscles and the skeletal alignment of the body is the impetus, the intention of the dancer. Where that intention is coming from is very, very important in shamanistic technique, and this is what distinguishes spirit dance from any old kind of dance like salsa. But even if you take salsa, which is a very popular dance style in the UK, the thing with salsa is that the dancers just learn these free positions when they're just moving. But once they get experience, once they're into the dance, then they move very fluidly, and there is actually no freeze frame position anymore. The dancers are continually moving around each other, continually moving. They never actually stop. They never actually stop moving. And this is the same in spirit dance. So
another way to think about that was when you're first starting to learn salsa, you might think strategically, I need to move to this position, I need to move to that position, underarm here, because you learn those categorized positions and things.
That's right.
And then when you get more experience, you start to not think about those and you flow through them, and they just happen, they just occur.
Yeah, and there's an intermediate stage to that, which is you understand the positions you need to be in. That's just to start with. Your teacher, your dance teacher, will show you those positions. I believe ballet is taught like this, in this way, in a big way. You understand those positions, and then you start to think about or understand how you can use your physicality in order to achieve those positions. That would be the midline. And then when you start to flow, when you start to get to the point where you don't have to think about it, your spirit is giving rise to those things in an artistic or creative way, or we use the word guchach, a graceful way, where you don't have to think about the physicality anymore. That's when you're moving into the realm of the top line. And so you can see people going through that kind of stack. The issue with shamanistic dance, spirit dance versus ordinary dance is that's where it stops with ordinary dance. It's your intention is giving rise to the dance. In spirit dance, you want to go a step further than that. That top line wants to merge into the environment in which you're part of and pick up on the changes that are going on in that environment. So you've got your own change, your old trigram going on. That would be the lower trigram in the hexagram. But the environment itself has energy change going on. And this is how spirit dance differs from dance, in that you pick up in shamanism, you pick up on those environmental factors. You make a weave, an energy weave with your dance that interacts with the energy weave that already exists within the environment. And this is the meaning of the 64 hexagrams. We have our change, the change within us is the lower three lines, and the changes that are going on in the environment or the context, they're the upper three lines. So that's how we end up with 64 combinations. And we haven't actually said anything about yin and yang on this particular podcast.
I was just about to ask you.
Though we have, and so this is how you end up with a categorization system. Yin and yang are philosophical concepts in Chinese thought, and you can pick many, many different streams of Chinese thought or thinking or exotericism, and yin and yang can be understood as lots of different things, virtually anything. In shamanism, we don't have concepts of yin and yang, but we do have concepts of a sort of creative approach and a nurturing type of approach. So the way I describe yin and yang are they're two different ways of understanding the same energy. And I think we've said this before. If someone pushes me, if I resist that push, I get, and don't allow them to push me, I get a yang experience of their energy. If the same person pushes me in the same way and I don't resist the push, I just allow them to push me, I get a yin experience of the same energy. But the key point, the energy under consideration is their push. It's not what I'm doing, it's their push. So it's actually the self-same energy. I'm just experiencing it in two different ways. If I resist it, I get a yang experience. And if I just sort of go with the flow, allow them to push me, then that would be a yin experience of the energy. So
just very briefly, could you relate that to the interaction with a person as well for a different angle to that?
So if I meet somebody for the first time and I'm quite interested in how they habitually deal with people, I can get some clues in terms of how. So say I'm at a conference or something, a business conference, and I see somebody interesting looking standing over by a wall. Maybe they give a speech earlier and I'm quite interested in what they said. I go over and I tap them on the shoulder and I'll say, "Oh, hi, I'm Damon." I'd look at their body language and how they interact with me. You know, a particular friend of mine, if I did something like that, he'd probably throw his arms around and go, "Hey, welcome," or something like that, maybe even give me a hug. You never know. That's a guy who's at one extreme, Another person might say, I say, "Hi, I'm Damon, and who are you?" And they're like, "Why do you want to know?" That would be at the other extreme, And they'll be turning their body away from me, far from giving me a hug or looking off to the side or keep doing what they're doing. They're two real extremes, but in terms of the baseline, the open person, the huggy person, let's call them the huggy person, they would be at the extreme yin of the baseline. A broken line is a yin line in a trigram.
And nurturing. That he or she would be nurturing
the interaction.
Interaction, yes.
Yeah. Whereas
allowing it to flow.
Yes.
Sorry.
I was agreeing with you until you said that.
Yeah,
allowing it to flow.
We'll rewind that bit. Forget that.
Yeah. The other person at the other extreme, why do you want to know who I am? And maybe they turn their body away slightly to the side, or if they're not looking directly at me, they won't necessarily turn towards me. They'll just turn their head and look at me, or may not even turn their head. If they're typing on a keyboard, they may just keep typing and just talk to me. Who are you? Or something like that. It's an old friend of mine. He used to work in a college. This is many years ago, before I met you. And I was he was in like what they call IT support or network support or something like that. And he was definitely, this is a yang baseline that we're talking about. He tended to be at quite the extreme end of a yang baseline. And this student somehow made their way into these people's den. It was a bit like a den. They had wires going everywhere and computers and fans and all sorts of things going on. The student came in and said, excuse me, my computer's not working. And he just said, "So?" That's the extreme end of yang baseline for IT support.
I remember when you first taught this to me, I would often then sort of start to see my own behaviour, and I noticed in myself when anybody asked me a personal question or I had to give any personal information, I would feel a resistance to that, and I'd be like, it would make me uncomfortable.
Yeah. And obviously
what would that be? That would be...
Yeah, that would be yang baseline. But what I was about to say was, obviously not everybody in the world is as extreme as that. Those are two examples of extreme. One friend of mine, very, very unfriendly to a new person coming in. The other friend of mine, the opposite extreme, probably would give them a hug, and say, "Hey, let's go and have a look, see if we can get it working," This sounds like fun kind of thing, Yeah. And so that would be a yang baseline and a yin baseline. A yin baseline would tend to be an open strategy. Generally, you have to, when you are try to understand what strategy somebody's employing in this area of the baseline, you have to take context into account. You have to, for instance, if the person feels secure, they're much more like in a secure environment. If I tap somebody on the shoulder in a dark alleyway, then maybe they may not turn around and give me a hug, But they need to feel secure if you're gonna try and understand their habitual baseline in that way. Also, what you find is people go through life as their strategy towards dealing with other people changes as time goes by, and the most likely of the three lines to change is actually the baseline. That is the most likely. And you can see this with people who've been in bad relationships. If they've been a very open, warm person, and they fall into a relationship, a loving relationship with somebody who then proceeds to treat them badly, you can see sometimes that their baseline will solidify as a result of that change. They'll go from a yin baseline to a yang baseline. So when they meet their next person, who this person may potentially be their next partner in life, the next love interest, then they may treat that person, they probably will treat that person with a good deal more caution than they did to the previous one, and that would be so these things are all relative, but they are interrelated, and you can generally get a sense. And we can do the same thing. I think we discussed it in a previous episode, so I don't go into too much detail there. But effectively, I think what we should get onto in this episode, because we're probably not going to have any time to do anything more than just this, is just to briefly talk through those 8 changes in terms of energy. So you can think of the baseline being either a broken line or a solid line. A broken line would be yin, a solid line would be yang. The midline, the same thing. It either have a broken line or a solid line in the midline, and the top line the same again. The top line would be either yang, which would be a solid line, or yin, which would be a broken line. And it can be in any context in the entire world. Remember that what these things effectively profile, it's not relationships between people, it's commonly occurring patterns that occur everywhere within nature.
Yeah.
So, for instance, the spiral form of galaxies, where you see that spiral form in a lot of galaxies, that would be two of these trigrams. The two trigrams in particular, one of them would be a yang baseline, a yin midline, and a yin top line, working together with a trigram that had a yin baseline, a yang midline, and a yang top line. So they would have what's called a I-ching relationship in Chinese. That means a 2-in-1 relationship, futatsu hitotsu in Japanese. Basically, they mutually support each other because the lines are opposite to each other. So let's just say those again. A yang baseline, a yin midline, and a yin top line combined together with a yin baseline, a yang midline, and a yang top line. Those two trigrams are the exact opposites of each other in terms of yin and yang on each line. And they, when you get trigrams, all these trigrams, these energy changes, they occur frequently within nature. When you get those things occurring together, they tend to mutually support. So spirals, any kind of spirals that you see in nature, the one that has a yang baseline, a yin midline, and a yin top line tends to be cyclical stuff, cyclical changes. So, energy going around in a cycle or a circle. Whereas the one that has a yin baseline, a yang midline, and a yang top line, that tends to be energy coming and going, like the waves on the beach. It tends to be compression and expansion, or just coming and going. When you put those two things together, this kind of cyclical aspect of energy and this coming and going energy, you end up with this mutual support thing that ends up with a kind of spiral characteristic, like the spiral nature of the galaxies. And so this is why we see spirals all over. This is a result of the fact that we see spirals everywhere in nature. We see water going down a plug hole. We see mollusk shells that spiral around. But these kind of spiral, and in spirit dance, there's spiral movement going on all the time, these kind of spiral energy. That spiral energy has two components, one of which is yang baseline, yin midline, yin top line. The other one is yin baseline, yang midline, yang top line. Put those two together, being exact opposites of these I-ching or futatsu hitotsu. Put those two things together, they mutually support, and they make the spiral patterns that we see commonly in nature. So the 8 trigrams, they break down into pairs. These mutually supportive 2-in-1 pairs. So if I describe the pairs, I use an acronym called SCRE, S-C-R-E, to help me remember. It's like a mnemonic or a rule of thumb that I just use to help me remember the pairs. So S stands for structure. And the two trigrams that tend to support the structural things that we see in the universe, like a tree, the trunk of a tree. Those two things are, one of the trigrams is yang, yang, yang. Now, I call that, what we've probably mentioned before is that the traditional translations of the trigrams in English are so misleading as to be almost that they're not just unhelpful, they're extremely unhelpful. So what we've done is, myself and some friends, including Joe, over the years, we've come up with our own English words that we use to describe these trigrams. And This one we call jag. So that's yang, yang, yang.
It tries to give a flavour of the
it does,
change, doesn't
but
it? A better idea of the flavour.
Yeah, we deliberately picked words that didn't carry too much heavy cultural baggage with them. So the traditional translations tend to carry enormous cultural baggage with them. So we're working off this principle of the English translation of the name of the trigram. We try to pick words that people don't read too much into. So we're trying to come to this activity with an empty cup, not with a full cup. So don't read too much into them. They're just labels, but we call that one jag. So that's solid baseline, solid midline, solid top line. And the change that tends to represent in the universe, the commonly occurring change, is support. Kind of a propping or support, something that supports something. So you can just think of a book sitting on a bookshelf. In a way, there's some jag involved there. The shelf supports the books that are on the shelf. But this can be jag. Jag doesn't have to, the yang, 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 it doesn't have to be a static. It can be a dynamic thing. And we'll get into that when we get into spirit dance. Obviously, there's nothing very static goes on in spirit dance, but it doesn't mean that jag's not there. Yeah. Its two-in-one partner is what we call meld. Well, this is the name label that we've described. And that is yin, 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 the exact opposite. So this ah, her, yi, two harmonized into one, or futatsu, totsu, two in one in Japanese. Its partner is yin, yin, yin. So yang, yang, yang for jag, yin, yin, yin for meld. That tends to be where energy joins together with other energy. It's a joining. So if you think of the two things put together, think of the Eiffel Tower. Jag is like those beams, those heavy iron beams that make up its structure, whereas meld is I'm using this bit of an analogy. Meld is like the places where the beams are joined together into that strong structure. Without meld, without all of those beams being joined together into that structure, it wouldn't be a very strong structure. If it was just loosely, big iron beams loosely laying against each other without any joining, the thing would collapse. Likewise, if it was nicely joined together, but those beams weren't very strong, they didn't provide a lot of support, the thing would just collapse. So you need both of those aspects, a supportive aspect and a joining aspect, in order to create some kind of structure.
Is a good analogy the bones in a person and the tendons in a person?
Yeah, there's an analogy as well. There's an analogy. But we've got to remember that we're also talking about energy here. So when we do spirit dance, yes, and in a way, matter is a form of energy. So your bones are a form of energy, and your tendons are a form of energy. But you can think of your skeletal alignment in the spirit dance, or the alignment of your skeleton. The bones are intrinsically very strong, but they need to be joined in a certain way to stop you collapsing in a heap or falling over or anything like that. So jag and meld are involved in structure. But as I said, this is a simplistic way of understanding it. We're not just talking about literal physical things, matter. We can also be talking about one energy stream that is supporting another energy stream. That would be still jag, even though it's not physical material, which is a form of energy. It's another form of energy. It could be kinetic energy. So one kinetic energy stream supporting another kinetic energy stream, that would still be jag. And one energy stream joining with another energy stream, that would still be meld. Just because they're not physical matter, they're not physical things, they are still those two things. And you know, in shamanism, we don't see matter as any different from any other kind of energy. So that's the first pair. S for structure, jag and meld. Yang, 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 yin, yin, yin.
Yeah.
The next one in the SCREE acronym is C for change. So these two names, we have torrent, which is a yin baseline, a yang midline, and a yin top line, and kindle, which is a yang baseline, a yin midline, and a yang top line. So in spirit dance, torrent is when you use some kind of existing energy. So you already have some momentum, or there's some energy there in the dance, and you use that energy or that momentum in order to create a transformation that causes something else to be going on. Whereas kindle is when you introduce some new energy into the system that wasn't there before. It's like kindling a fire, right? The stuff isn't burning. I stick a match in. That's like putting some new energy into the situation. So if I'm taking control of an existing energy stream, or if I'm repurposing an existing energy stream, that would be torrent. That's yin, yang, yin. Remember, we always read upwards from the base. So yin baseline, yang midline, yin top line. Yin being a broken line, yang being a solid line. And kindle, yang baseline, yin midline, yang top line. That's a solid line, a broken line, and a solid line at the top. Those two things, again, mutually support each other. All of the energy in your spirit dance, or all of the energy in any given system in the world, all the energy is one of those two forms. You're repurposing existing energy, or you're introducing new energy into that system, into the thing of note. And these two concepts, torrent and kindle, very, very important in spirit dance, because we do that all the time in spirit dance, just non-stop, continuously. So that's how S for structure, C for change. And, you can think of those two things as changing, repurposing existing energy or taking control of existing energy and introducing a new energy. Those two things are like the change. It's a bit confusing. Change is probably not the best word, because all of these things are changes, but words is a bit of a problem, especially with English. So the next pair are for return. We've already discussed these. So these are squall, which has a yin baseline, a yang midline, and a yang top line. That is the compression and expansion, or coming away and going back, a wave-like action. And Gaia, which is a yang baseline, a yin midline, and a yin top line. That is cycles, energy cycles. So we see energy cycles all over nature, energy being recycled. I mean, for instance, simply the rain, the water evaporates off the sea, it goes up into the clouds go over the land, the rain drops on the land, the water runs down into the river runs down to the sea, back into the sea, the water evaporates off the sea, and it goes round and round in cycles. And this is what we see in nature time and time again. We see loads of cycles. All that stuff is Gaia. Likewise, we see lots of wave-like compression and expansion and wave-like actions in nature, in energy changes. That's squall, yeah? So the wave-like compression and expansion, going away and coming back again, that's squall, that's broken yin baseline, solid yang midline, solid yang top line. And Gaia, which is the cyclical energy being cycled, is solid yang baseline, broken yin midline, broken yin top line. And then finally we have E, so that's SCR, structure, change, which isn't the best name. Maybe we can come up with some other word with C. And R for return. Two different ways to return. One's go away and come back again, and the other one is go around in a cycle. And then finally, we've got E, which is extremes. This is how do natural systems in the natural world, how do those systems tend to deal with extremes of energy? And there are two of these. The first one we call shard, which is a yin broken baseline, a yin broken midline, and a yang solid top line. That's shard. And that is where one energy stream cuts or severs another energy stream. Mir, which is a solid yang baseline, a solid yang midline, and a broken yin top line, that is when one energy stream draws out another energy stream. So you can think of...
It provokes it.
Yeah, so you can think of water behind a dam as an analogy. The water's quite happy there behind the dam. There's a lot of jag and meld going on. The dam's all hopefully nicely joined together. And then there's it's also very strong. It's very supportive. It's holding the water back behind the dam. And then maybe in World War II, the dam busters come along and they drop a bomb, which blows a hole in the dam. The dam is broken, is punctured through, it's cut. The energy stream of the dam, if you like, is punctured by the energy stream of the bomb. And then Mir happens. If you think of the water then passes through, and in a way, one way to think about it is drawn out. You can think of the valley down which the sudden rushing torrent of water progresses, you can think of that as like sucking or drawing out the water out the dam, sucking it down to the lake or the newly forming lake. There possibly wasn't a lake there before, but there is now, And maybe that's quite a violent analogy to use. I could probably have used an easier one, but the reason I picked that particular analogy is that shard and mere tend to occur in extreme places. They tend to occur when there are extremes of energy or extreme situations. So, for instance, Takayama Miki, the shamaness who we've mentioned multiple times on this podcast, used shard, that's the yin baseline, yin midline, yang topline. She used that particular one as one of the ways of talking about when breathing stops on death. It's like the breath of life is cut off. You can see that it sort of links in it to Amskar, which she was big on, although she didn't use Mongol words, she used Japanese words, but Amskar, yeah. And so all of these changes, they're commonly occurring in nature. And although the Chinese people have this sort of system for talking about them, the 8 trigrams, actually in spirit dance, the Mongol words for a lot of the actions that we apply in spirit dance have you can make quite a nice mapping to some of these things, although the Mongols themselves wouldn't talk in terms of the 8 trigrams. In terms of the verbs for the changes that they would use in describing their spirit dance, you can actually quite easily, it's not difficult. It's not like I'm any kind of genius having come up with this. This is very, very easy and straightforward. So for instance, we talked about this word tairak, people who have a fairly unsophisticated spirit dance. They do tairak, takarak, which is this sort of cutting hick step or something of that nature in very simplistic spirit dance, because the cutting fits very, very nicely in with the music, with the rhythm of the music. So there you are. There's a mapping. We can say that the Chin shard is sort of characterized by that cutting action in the spirit dance called tairak in Mongol. You can see that it cuts the flow of the energy. It cuts the movement, just like shard does, yin baseline, yin midline, solid top line, you can see. And in the Chinese analogies for these things, they actually call that mountain. One of the symbols the Chinese have used historically for shard is a mountain. And people think, well, what on earth has that got to do with mountains? But if you look at a mountain range, it looks all jaggy. It looks all jagged at the top. It's like a sawtooth. And this is what they meant early on. That's why they came up. You can see why they came up with these bad translations. Even in Chinese, they're just symbols. The top of a mountain range looks like a serrated knife. It looks like a cutting edge. It's quite sharp. And shard tends to have this sharp cutting quality. So that's where that came from originally, but when, say, you explain the changes of shard, the change of shard to somebody, one energy stream severing another, and then you say it's a mountain, you can see where confusion arrives if you really don't understand where that came from. Yeah. And you have to be careful because these things are about changes, they're not about things. People over the centuries have used things as sort of symbols or badges of these things, but there's a lot of misunderstanding. And so coming back to this point, not understanding is a better starting point than misunderstanding. This is where we want to start from, with an empty cup. So there's a brief rundown. So just to recap, SCRE, scree. S for structure, jag and meld. That's all the yangs and all the yins. C for change. That's the badly named one. Torrent, which is reading up from the baseline, yin, yang, yin. And kindle, which is reading up from the baseline, yang, yin, yang. Then R for return, squall, which is yin, yang, yang. And Gaia, which is yang, yin, yin. And then E for extremes, shard, which is yin, yin, yang. And mir, which is yang, yang, yin. And they are the 8 trigrams. And we're up on the hour, Joe. So
no, that's been fantastic.
Maybe we can.
Well, I think
crack on next time. And what I think we've done there is we've rushed it a bit.
Oh yeah, well, I think it's great because it's this stuff is going to take many episodes, I imagine, and a bit of time to absorb. You know what I mean? So
it does look like it's going to take quite a while.
It's not something you can listen to on one passing of a random podcast episode. But there's also something which I think we glossed over as well, which we could briefly go over on the next episode, and that is we talked about the way of understanding the baseline, but we didn't talk about ways of understanding the midline and the top line. So I think I think that,
Yeah.
in terms of the physicality.
We could review that.
So,
we could review that. I think we have done that before.
Yeah, but in this episode specifically, we talked about the baseline.
Sure.
So I think it would be cool to go over the midline and the top line in that context so that people can understand the diagrams a bit better.
Sure.
So, yeah, fantastic. That's been great, Damon. Thank you so much. And we will continue with this over the next few episodes. I imagine this is going to be quite a few. So, as I said at the beginning, we may have a run on this. We may interject the odd episode to break it up every now and again because I think it's a huge topic. So, we'll just see how we go with it, yeah?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. So head over to wovenenergy.com, guys. wovenenergy.com/start-here for your exclusive Get Started episode. Also, head to iTunes, find us on iTunes, and if you like this podcast, then please give it a review. We like 5-star reviews here. And hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, Joe.
Cool.